It's not lost on me that some of my favorite episodes of this show so far have been when there are absolutely no aerial battles whatsoever. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Part 6 of Masters of the Air is here. This episode sort of acts as a triangle. We're following three characters. We're following Cross, we're following Rosie, and we're following Bucky. And it's sort of the aftermath of the massive battle that took place, the harrowing battle that took place in the last episode. So, with the fallout of Munster, we start with Bucky, who we last saw in Germany. He was on his own, and we find him that he's scavenging for food. He's trying to survive. He winds up on a farm where he steals some lettuce from this farm, and then he sees some children on the farm. And he tells them originally to be quiet, but he has them at gunpoint. I don't think the gun would have made a difference one way or the other. He's in hostile territory, and so they sound the proverbial alarms, the children do, by screaming, Americana, Americana, and they let them know that there's a gun, and so people sort of provide chase to him. And it seems like for a brief moment he is going to get away, but then he is, and sadly does not, and he becomes a prisoner of war. Kraz is sort of still feeling the guilt, the shame of not being one of the folks that were up in the air. He is sent to Oxford. His commanding officer says, you need to get away. You've been kind of in your sorrows. I'm going to send you off to Oxford to be a representative of the 100th at Oxford School to sort of do some classes, learn some stuff, but just to get your mind off of this, off all this loss, but specifically the loss of your friend Bubbles. He has a pretty cool monologue where he talks about the barracks and where everybody sleeps. There's the loss or the remembrance of the ghost of the brethren that he's lost, and it's sort of just sitting in there all the time. It's just, you can't get out of it. You can't escape it. You're just in it, and he sort of needed a moment to get out of that. He gets, however, it is completely thrown right back in his face. He gets to Oxford, and he receives a letter from his wife because they're still doing the pen pal thing. It's a beautiful long letter. We don't hear the entire overlay of the letter because it's lengthy, and I'm like, yeah, I was hoping to guys like, please don't read the whole letter. Please don't read the whole letter because I don't think that is important to his character or what they have. We already know that they have a relationship, but we do see at the very bottom of the letter that it says, "P.S. Tell or say hi to Bubbles for me," which immediately kicks him back into sadness because Bubbles is no longer with them. And this is in quick enough of a time that he has not sent note to her to let her know that Bubbles is no longer there. Then the third piece of the triangle is Rosie, who his commanding officer sends him and the remaining team who survived the monster raid, the monster attack, to a flak house to just sort of get some R&R, if you will. This place has croquet and racquetball and poker games and zen-like gardens and music, things to just sort of get their mind at ease. But it also has a doctor on site who's sort of in charge of making sure that their brains aren't completely broken from all the loss that they just saw. Sort of make sure that they are okay to be one to go back up into the air and do their jobs as they are. And so there's a guy showing Rosie all of this stuff, and Rosie's like, cool, 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 cool. When can I leave? When can I not be here? And it is clear that Rosie wants no part of this. And we learn as we go along that he wants to get back into the sky, or he is giving the bravado of wanting to get back in the sky, but there's a lot more underneath that that is both frightening him and making him annoyed about being here. It's at this point that the episode, we thought the last episode was dark. It's at this point that this episode just goes, nah, hold my beer last episode. I'm going to get darker. And the road, it's interesting to see that the three paths that they show us, the path that Bucky goes down is horrific. And it's interesting because Bucky was the one of these three who was so gung ho to just go into action, like burn everything down. We're going to bomb up the church. Who gives a damn? They're a part of this. We're going to burn them down. And now he's sort of seeing the ramifications of what that quick, short firedness, shoot first type of mentality does. But he is on a train with the other POWs who have been captured. And he mentions for a moment about an escape plan. And they're like, Nazis shut that down. Like, shut up, be quiet. They get off the train and they end up at a location where an RAF bomb has just gone off, and you see sort of the ramifications of all the Germans nearby, just kind of like shell shock, angry, volatile, and they see Americans. And when they see Americans, Bucky sees firsthand what the violence that others apply to them, what that creates from people who really didn't have anything to do with it. Somewhat, there's also Nazis present, but their violence turns, and they just start attacking these POWs, and one gets their throat slit, and we see it. We see another one who just a Nazi officer just starts shooting them in the head. And Bucky, the only reason Bucky is not killed in this moment is because the officer's gun not jams, runs out of bullets, and so they knock him unconscious. That's a lot to see. It's a very tough sequence to see. It's violent, it's aggressive, as this point in time was, and the way that it's shot, it's shot almost from the viewpoint of Bucky, where it's like disorienting. Like you can't really make out stuff. All colors sort of seem the same, but you just know that someone they are attacking you, and this just shows you sort of the fervor that occurs when we just haphazardly just drop bombs everywhere. This is sort of Bucky sort of seeing that firsthand. So it is interesting that he is on that path, considering how he felt about all of this. Rosie meets with the doctor, and the doc is kind of just trying to touch base with him, just see how he feels. The doc reaches out and say, how are you? How do you feel?" And Rosie's response multiple times is, "I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." This is a throwaway. His direct response is, "I'm fine," which typically means, especially if anybody, all my males out there, all my guys out there, typically what I'm fine means either A, leave me alone, like I don't want to talk about this, or B, you are not the person that I want to have this conversation with. Like I don't know you to have open up myself to you. And so that rapport has not sort of been built between the two of them yet for him to feel comfortable with that. But the doctor straight up says, like, this is when we learned that Rosie has been on 3 missions in 3 days. And in those 3 missions in 3 days, this last mission, the Munster mission, is the one where he lost 120 folks. And so there comes a time where your brain just sort of snaps and you've been stressed to an end. And the doc's kind of like, you've gone through a lot in 3 days. And I don't know if your brain has truly processed what's happening or what has happened, but maybe it should. Rosie's not really trying to hear that. And Rosie's like, "You're not letting me leave." And the doc's like, "Nah, not until 5 days." And so I think it's clear that the doc is kind of give him a moment to sort of like take in the Black House, sort of learn the place, but also, and not push it, but know that you're not leaving here until we do get underneath the hood of what's going on in your head just a little bit. After being knocked unconscious, we go back to Bucky, who wakes up on almost like a wheelbarrow of sorts, with blood over all covering himself. It's his own blood plus the blood of other POWs have sort of been stacked on top of them. He's in his wheelbarrow with another person who's sort of semi-conscious, sort of still alive. The Nazis are basically digging holes to bury these folks in there. They've killed a bunch of them. Most of the folks on this barrel. These 2 barrels are dead. Bucky's trying to tell him, like, shut up, stop praying, stop praying. He's repeating a prayer over and over again, to the point where they come over and they crack him over the head and blood splatters onto Bucky. For that moment, they think that that guy was the only one that was alive, and then they see that Bucky is. And Bucky runs. Bucky takes off, and not getting very far because they're kind of like, we should. One of them's getting away. Should we chase him? They're like, no, he's not going to get very far, and they're not wrong. He ends up passed out, probably due to loss of blood, not too far off, and he is recaptured again. And so it's this vicious cycle of him getting away, thinking he's getting away multiple times in this episode, but then realizing that no, this is the life that you have right now. And it it is doing a pretty good job of showing the ramifications of the war, a war that at this point, because of what he believes has happened to Buck, he was so gung-ho to be a part of. A new character is introduced named Sandra, and we meet them while Cross is sort of half naked in a minimal amount of dress, just in his white skivvies, if you will, in front of a mirror, doing his best Clark Gable-ish impersonation. He is introduced to what is his roommate, who he believed to have been a male, based on all the documents, all the stuff. Sandra comes in, and she says she sort of has to hide her femininity, hide the fact that she's a female on a lot of documents, so that she can get access and do the things that she wants to. She's a very vague character. We don't get to learn much about who she is and what her history is and what her position in the military is, but we do get to see her have a connection with Cross, which I think was sort of needed and necessary, and for him to sort of heal a little bit. This is an episode about healing for everybody, and they all sort of do it in their own way. It's just that unfortunately, Bucky's is it's a treacherous and traumatizing road that he has to go on. We see a moment where Rosie at the Flack house is kind of just taking in the house. He sees that some of his people on his team are enjoying the what the place has to offer. They're playing croquet, racquetball. You does see a man just bawling his eyes out on the side. And so in that moment, you sort of see that whatever this place is trying to do, it's creating a distraction, allowing you to sort of release whatever it is that's inside. However you need to get to that path, this place is sort of allowing for that to happen. And in this moment, all Rosie needs or is taking in is just getting fresh air. That's what he needs in this moment. Probably my favorite part of this episode was the Crosby and Sandra conversation with the superior foreign officer, who I think he outranked both of them. But they're having a conversation about U.S. men and how the foreign officer is saying that U.S. men are much more zestier with women, a lot more aggressive with women. They don't show respect towards women. He says they act as like dumb Neanderthals and kind of like, I'm taking the prey or whatever. And they would take a duchess to bed if they could. And Sandra gives a nice retort to that. I'll let that play out because that's not that important a piece. It lets you know who she is, but it's a retort to that. So then the foreign officer sort of doubles up and says that it's not just the women that they sort of conquest and take over. They're aggressive and like they start bar fights and they start these. They get super saucy, super drunky. They just don't have a lot of respect or morals or dignity when they go out on these leaves. And he's trying to sort of tell Cross in this moment, you guys should do a better job of learning them respect when they go out on these holidays or these times. And I'm going to read this exactly because this is important. Perhaps if you taught them morals, they would know how to act away from home or the first time, living it up. And Cross's response is very eloquent. It's with respect, sir, each day could be their last chance to live it up. So I won't be giving them a lecture before they go on their weekend pass. The nice little stinger. That guy just shuts up, takes his laurel. Cross does it in a way where he slaps him. He slaps his superior officer in the face, but he puts him in his place. He uses sir. He uses all the things that he's supposed to, but kind of like let you know, like these guys. I just lost 120 men. You're not going to tell me how to tell my men to act when they may never get the chance to come back to this world again. So, I'm gonna pass on that. But then there's a moment where Sandra and Cross go on a walk and sort of get to know each other a little bit more. Where my flags went up like danger. Cross, you're a married man, and you seem to be right now the person that of all of us, you're our narrator, and you seem to be the one who has sort of a respect level to them. You guys are roommates. Stop getting so close to this girl. Because the Americans like the sex. Rosie can't sleep. So he comes down out of his sleep downstairs and he sees the doctor there. Now, there is nothing you can tell me that doesn't let me believe that the doctor has sort of this planned out. He knows that at some point in time, with all the stuff that these gentlemen have seen, somebody's not going to sleep. I'm just going to hang down here at night and somebody's going to sort of just fall in. And in that, they have a couple of drinks, they listen to some music, and they just sort of discuss what's going on. It sort of opens up that chain of communication between the two of them so that Rosie can eventually just sort of let out a bit of what he is feeling inside. So when I said earlier, like, part two, where I don't feel comfortable talking to you. This is sort of getting rid of that, so I do feel comfortable enough to have that conversation with you. And in this, there's a line where the doctor says something to the effect of, this war, humans don't have the capacity, or not meant to be in something like this. Like this, we weren't made to behave in this barbaric of a manner. And it's, the war has sort of done this to us on both sides. To which Rosie kind of calls BS. He throws BS out there at it, because he sort of starts saying, this facade that we're doing isn't normal. Like the croquet, the foxhounds, the music, none of this stuff isn't normal. Like everything that they're doing, we are sort of providing a safety, or an answer, or responding to a need of protection for people. And in that, we've created a rhythm. Like he's saying, like, basically, I went 3 days in a row because it gave me a rhythm. Like, I need to get right back up there. I need to get right back up there. And so for him, stopping that rhythm, stopping that, and just thinking about it, or like sitting in the sorrow for a little bit, is for him scarier and more fearful than going right back up. Like, he'd rather just keep going back up and not even think about it, which in the long run will cause more damage, because when he does finally stop, he's going to have just tons of it to fall on him, and his brain is going to be overwashed with it. Where the doc is like, this flak house exists so that when you do take breaks, when you do have those moments where you're not going right back into the air, you can sort of reflect on it. You have to get out of that rhythm so that you can be a human, because humans need to have this. And he just says, the rhythm, I just need to have that rhythm. And the doc responds to him like, it's not about just keeping your rhythm, it's about keeping the rhythm of your entire team. And that is important, because Rosie is now sort of the leader of these men. Like, they look to him, which we'll get a note later in the episode that is how they look at it. And it hits him a little bit harder. But that's sort of a moment where we learn that the repetition of it is what he is seeking. He doesn't want to stop to think about it, because that is frightening. And earlier in the last episode, we saw a couple of people saying, like, we're supposed to have breaks. We're supposed to have these moments. This is why they're supposed to have those breaks, because they need to have that decompression moment. When they don't, things sort of build up, and all this death, 100, especially one mission having 120 deaths, is a lot for any human being to have. To know that you are one of the 4 or 5 people who actually got to come back from this, that's a lot. Back in the room, Cross and Sandra have a drink, and they're talking. It is still friendly at this moment, but you can tell there's chemistry between the two of them. And the conversation gets on a drunken escapade that he and Bubbles have. Sandra asks him about Bubbles, thinking that Bubbles is a lady of the night because of the name, but he's like, no, Bubbles is a friend of mine, one of my ace boons. And Sandra sort of says, it's always good to have that ace in the hole. And that's when Cross lets on. They're like, yeah, he's no longer with us. I lost him a week ago. And that's when we sort of learn that this is his healing moment. He realizes that he felt to blame for Bubbles' death. He felt that him taking the position of group navigator stopped him from being able to set that team out onto the right path of where they needed to go, and he's responsible for his friends and the loss of everyone else. So when Sandra just completely comes back and shuts that down, like, no, this ain't got nothing to do with you. This is on Hitler. The reason why we're up there, the reason why we're doing all of this stuff, is because of Hitler. It has nothing to do with you. And I think when they finish their drink, and she sort of just gives a loving, like, little pat on the shoulder and goes off to her respective bed, because I feel like in that moment she probably would have been interested in making a pass, but she saw that in that moment he needed to have that moment to sort of heal, and that was his healing moment. Like, this isn't the time for this. You need to deal with whatever demons you have. I'm going to let you deal with that tonight. My second favorite scene of this episode was the interrogation with Bucky going to Lieutenant Haussmann. Now, Lieutenant Haussmann was trying to play a game. He was thinking he was a bit slick, and what American POWs are, what we're told that they are trained to recite back to folks, are their name, their rank, and their serial number. That's it. And so Bucky does that originally. He gives them the name, rank, serial number. And Haussmann starts to try to sort of play a game. He gives him some liquor, some whiskey, a cigarette. He's trying to sort of get some type of familiarity with them. But Bucky's knows what's going on. He brings up World Series. He invokes Buck's name, which is what then just shuts down the conversation. Like it seems like he's on sort of a wavelength, and then he just shuts it down when he brings up Buck, and he just starts repeating name, rank, serial number, name, rank, serial number, to the point where that interrogation is over because he knows he's not getting anything out of Bucky. It's interesting that there's a lot of information that they have, but there's something that's missing with which was what basically they wanted the location and obvious uh, unit of where their whole team is. They know he's in the 100th. They know some of the pilots that are on this team. He even sprouts. They're like, hey, we shot down some of your best, but they don't know specific things that are keeping them sort of behind the eight ball a little bit. And he trying to get that out of them. And Bucky's like, not getting that from me. We then do what is our first of a triangle, right? They go from one scene to another scene to another scene, sort of juxtaposing what these three people are going through. We see Rosie in the flag house kind of having a moment of healing, if you will. He goes through, he sees more, he's taking in fresh air. Um, he cracks a smile a little bit at some stuff that is happening in the flag house, while Bucky is being treated like cattle. In a harrowing sequence, we see while he is being escorted onto a train, cold, dark, dungy train with other POWs. There's a train with Nazi insignia on it coming past that has Jewish women, kids, and men who is headed for a concentration camp. Yeah, that's that's a rough scene to see. Um, in addition to all the other things that we've seen in this episode, back to back episodes of just like hitting you in the face with like this. These folks went through some history is harsh and hard, but needed to be known. Sandra and Cross, we join them again, and their camaraderie, their quasi courtship continues. She actively will not talk about work or whatever she is she does. We still don't quite know who or what it is she does. But they find a party. And they find a party of people who don't seem to have any type of attachment to the war. Like nobody there is really pro or anti-war. They're just kind of away from it. It gives them a little bit of moment to sort of just live. They have a cheers moment for Bubbles, and then we hear an overlay of a song called "Tear the World Down," which plays as they dance. We see Bucky arriving at like a new Nazi camp with barking dogs and Nazis armed to the teeth. And we see Rosie sort of having a calming moment of just sinking into a bath. Again, three different looks at what they have to go through on the other side of the monster battle, and whatever levels of healing happens. Now, it's easier to see what the healing is with Cross and with Rosie. It's harder to see the healing that Bucky has, but we'll get there. After the party, Cross and Sandra make their way back home. As they arrive, she's been given a letter. They've been looking for her all day. She's been given a letter. It basically says she has to leave immediately. Like she's like, I can't tell you why. Sorry, I got to be out. But she does give Cross a letter or a note to say, hey, if you're ever in London, come look me up here. It's interesting because in this moment, Cross has a sort of thing. This is where our night ends, and she's like, "We live in the same place." I'm of the belief that had that letter not occurred to get her off, I think they would have slept together that night. I just had a feeling that their connection was getting so strong. He had healed. Something gave that off to me. Now I do think that of all the people to turn him down, it would have been her because I feel like some of her moral, but I think she genuinely was into him, and I think likewise he was into her. Neither there. I think the London cue of like, hey, if you're ever in London, come find me, sort of gives a little bit more credence to that. But she takes off in a hilarious way. She just steals a bike. It's like, yo, this one's for Fortunes of War. I'm out. And it's one of those things where she is such an enigma to Crosby that I think he's going to try and like, I need to find out more about her because I want to know more about her as a viewer. So I know he does. We see Rosie come down and join his crew at a poker table. They're having a good chat. They're talking. He's like, yeah, cool. For the first time, he is normally has been sort of an outsider viewing everybody sort of doing their thing, and he's taking it in. He's finally gotten to a point where he feels his walls are down enough, and I'm going to have a goal and go mingle and have a game with my team. In this game, though, they started talking about how Rosie's voice over the comms when looked like all hope was lost, all hell was breaking loose. You came on singing some Artie Shaw song. And that was the first time that they had a moment that they weren't scared shitless and that they knew that they weren't alone out there. And that moment sort of gave credence to what the doctor said, like the rhythm that you keep talking about isn't just for you, it's for your team as a whole. And that sort of gave him that click, like, I got it, doc. I got it. And then they started having more sort of war stories to sort of just let that out so it's not sitting there. And for the first time, it seemed like Rosie was okay having those stories being told. And you see Crosby kind of having moments of stories and whatnot. And there's a nice overlay that Crosby has that I have to read because I was like, that's perfect. That is what this episode is. The stories, the drinks, the time to reset, all those things were needed to help them climb back into that plane and do it all over again. Both Rosie and Cross, to a lesser extent, although he wasn't up in the air, but they needed these sort of resets of their brain of what they were doing to get back in the air. And so we see Rosie we see some time of it pass, and he goes back to his plane. He goes back to the barracks, goes back to the base, and he is prepping to get on this plane. The plane has now been named Rosie's Riveters, fitting name. And he has a pause moment before he gets into the plane. And whatever fear, whatever trepidation he had in his head, having those 5 days to sort of, one, connect with your team, but two, to sort of just get some of the weight of whatever just happened off, allow him to finally jump back into that plane. And that was sort of his healing moment that sort of occurred, as has Cross. The final sequence of this episode is seeing Bucky arrive at the Stalag, and it's a big gated fenced camp that is holding all the prisoners of war, which, as we walk down this path, we start seeing that a lot of the 100th is there. So a lot of people that were thought to have been dead have been just captured. And eventually we hear a familiar face from Buck who says, what took you so long? And it's in that moment that Bucky has a bit of healing. A bit of healing in all the hate that was on his heart because he thought his best friend was dead. And so he was entrusted, just filled with anger and hate. And that's gone now because his best friend is here. And so, yes, he is still walking into pure hell. He has no idea how to get out of this, what's on the other side of this. But now he knows he is not doing it alone. He's doing it with the other 100th, but he's really not doing it alone because his best friend is there. And so there's a brief moment of a smile that sort of has like, he's alive. My buddy's here. We're going to figure this out. We can do this together. But then that smile sort of fades as he starts to seeing like, what the hell are we walking into? Like, what is this? And that's the episode. It's a really well done episode. It's like, again, I say that my two favorite episodes have been the episodes that just deal with character stuff. This one and the one before our monster battle, where we just see them sort of going from places to Germany. Those are some of my best stuff. Obviously, the aerial stuff, they nail it. It's all great in here. But when we get to the meat and potatoes of who these people are or what makes them tick, it makes everything else work so much better. I love this episode. I think it's their longest episode so far. Might be wrong, but I feel like this was definitely an hour, and I feel like most of them have been like around the 45 to 55 minute mark. Which makes sense with them having to tell 3 stories at once. But yeah, powerful episode, healing episode, harrowing episode, because we see a lot of just hard hitting stuff, but a beautiful and well done piece of work. What did you guys think about part 6 of Masters of the Air? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can hit us up on email, hollywoodalreadydidit@gmail.com, or on X at Hollywood80i. We also have a podcast with the same name. It's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.